Well, let me tell you about my experience in Hawaii because this
Heck yeah.
absolutely blew my mind, and it really was cementing. I've always had this idea, and you and I have talked so much about retail and athlete, and I finally got to see an example of what this looks like at maybe the highest level, and it really made me reconsider things that I thought were right and things that I didn't think would work. And this whole thing was incredible, really, to see firsthand. And we've had a lot of discussions about this, but I really want to just like have this riff session with you, fill you in on what I saw, and then we just talk all about it. So, just a quick backstory, right? I went to Oahu. We were staying in Waikiki, and my friend Kaikea, who's Jamie O'Brien's business manager, hits me up and says, "Hey, do kids want to surf? Absolutely, let's go." And if you don't know, Jamie O'Brien is a legendary surfer, Red Bull surfer. He's got he has 1.27 million subscribers on YouTube. And he also has a handful of surf experience locations, which we're going to get into.
Right.
And so we go to the Waikiki location, which is paired up with the Twin Fin Hotel. Now, this is an important factor for later. Anyway, we go into the shop. They take our two kids out for this amazing surf experience. And our little guy is pretty little. So one of the instructors shares a board with him. And while they're surfing, he basically catches the wave and then grabs my little guy's hand and stands him up, and they surf the wave.
Nice.
Uh, the other instructor, my buddy Kaikea, actually went out and did it. Big shout out to him because they took such good care of us. But he would take my daughter's the back of her board and like shove her into the wave, and then she would stand up and surf. And it was this amazing experience because I think surfing is kind of hard. And the fact
Totally.
that like an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old were surfing legit waves in, I mean, the session was 90 minutes, but they were up on the waves in like 20.
That's awesome.
And they just had the best time ever, and it was incredible. One of the other things that we saw, we were watching our kids surf, and we were trying to do the iPhone from the shore to like film them and stuff, and then we saw these people in the water like taking pictures of our kids, and we're like, what's going on here? Anyway, they had this amazing session. They come back to the shore. They're like, let's go back to the surf shop. So we go there. We walk in. There's this big screen TV on the inside. And they're like, oh, by the way, we had photographers and videographers in the water. You guys want to see footage from the session? And, yeah, absolutely, we do. And it's like the sickest photos of our kids from the water with Waikiki in the background, standing up on waves. Oh, you guys want to buy the photo package? Absolutely, yes. Take our money. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Take all my money.
Everything about this experience was super, super dialed. And I think we can break into exactly how all the pieces fit together. But to see this actually come together in person just blew my mind because I'm very well aware of Jamie O'Brien as a surfer and as a content creator. But this was
Mm-hmm.
the first time actually seeing athlete retail up close. And you think about the 360 that you want to make around yourself as an athlete, having partners and content and some sort of merch or gear or product that you make available. But retail feels like a really giant step.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot by watching it, and I'm hoping to share a lot with you. And I think it's going to, kick off some pretty interesting discussions.
Yeah,
But
that's insane to hear because like that's the kind of thing that we think up in our minds, like, oh, wouldn't it be rad if we did this? And then we had a surfer in the water, like pictures and like the whole thing. And then you're like, you just become completely overwhelmed and don't even know where to start. But to see somebody like actually implementing this thing that looks like they just said, what is awesome? Let's do it all. And it's actually working and functioning is like, that's so inspiring.
yeah, and he has the unlimited funnel because he's going to keep making really rad surf videos on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
More people are going to be searching this stuff out. Although, and I think we can come back to this, I think that the bulk of the people that actually go to this surf experience may not even know that Jamie O'Brien's a famous surfer with a YouTube channel. But I think we'll come back to that. What I do want to do is, because I think probably a lot of people listening to the podcast aren't that familiar with Jamie O'Brien either, I want
Sure.
to just do like a quick rundown of his backstory and kind of how he got to here, because I can tell you that he's a pro surfer, but I think it's really important to understand his background of like how he got to be in this position, because it's not obvious to every athlete that they should open a retail shop. It's barely any athletes have it. I mean, I think the only other, I was trying to think about this. The only other athletes I can think of that have any sort of retail presence whatsoever, Larry Bird has like a car dealership chain in
Oh, wow.
Indianapolis. I'm sure there are other football players that have, like car dealerships and stuff like that, but it's not too common, right? Can you think of any other athletes that have their own retail spaces?
I feel like I heard something about Shaq having a whole like mess of can't remember what sort of fast food it was. Something
Oh,
like that.
yeah, I can
Um,
see that.
but no, I mean, it's certainly not. I've just heard stories of people like picking up franchises just because they have like buku amounts of money and like, oh yeah, well I heard that laundromats like actually are a great business to buy, so I bought a bunch of those. Versus like I was a basketball player, I'm going to start a basketball company, like Killian with Normal, like yeah, it's not that common, and it's like incredibly difficult because you're not just. I mean, I've like set up a little company and everything, but it's barely a company, and the steps between like what we know how to do as an athlete and the steps to like how do you run a company or set up a company and get the people to do all the little tasks that are just ideas but need to be implemented. That's like really impressive.
It's telling to me that more athletes would rather put the effort in to launch a brand and have a higher success rate overall than they would to launch retail. Like that just shows how difficult it must be to actually make this whole thing happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're like really trained these days to like the direct consumer thing. It seems like pretty simple. Like I just call someone to get some t-shirts, and like I have a lot of people that follow me, and they'll probably buy a thing with my face on it or something that I make up. But retail is just, man, there's like staffing and logistics and all of these things of like stocking multiple locations. Even if you just have one location, like keeping that, actually having stuff on the shelves, that's what's a big thing that's like stopped me from doing it, is going, man, I got to figure out how to like keep track of inventory between like stuff that gets mailed out and have somebody work there. Like I can't be there all the time. And then you just become overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let me give you a little bit of Jamie O'Brien
Yeah, let's
backstory,
do
and
it.
then we'll get into all that. So, Jamie O'Brien, probably one of the better known surfers out of Hawaii, has like a really cool style, surfs soft tops, has been a Red Bull athlete for 16 years, I think. He started around 2008. He was sort of an up and coming surfer, I think 2004, 2005. He's won Pipeline a bunch of times. But in 2004, he actually made his first surf film, and then he followed it up in 2008, which is about the time he got into Red Bull. Now, to put that into the timeline for all of action sports, the first Travis Rice Red Bull film, That's It, That's All, came out in 2008. So this is
Wow.
about the same time that he's coming in. And around that same time, there was a web series called Sheckler Sessions, which was sort of a vlog style Red Bull skate YouTube
Yeah.
thing. And actually around that same time is when YouTube itself launched, right? 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
So watching videos on the internet was starting to become kind of a thing. It's weird to put that in perspective of like, oh, we've only actually been able to watch YouTube videos for like 15 or 16 years.
Yeah. And it's really only come on super strong, I feel like, since 2015 or 16. And then COVID just like
Yeah,
accelerated
exactly.
the whole thing super hard. But yeah, in 2010, it was like, that's where cat videos go
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah. So to be making films that early on is like, and maybe that's just how you do it. Like so much of making content as an athlete is sort of part of the whole thing, YouTube or not. Like we've always made sick videos that we can distribute. I mean, I've been making videos for bikes since they were on VHS, which makes me super old, but whatever, here we are.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe that like gave him a little bit of the foundation for what he's doing now. The fact that he didn't have YouTube back in 2004 and he had to figure out distribution and that whole thing. Like YouTube now, it's so easy to distribute
yeah,
your content in that way.
absolutely. So he comes into Red Bull. He's got a few films under his belt. That's It, That's All comes out. And in this era, they're trying to figure out who are the people that are going to kind of carry each one of the sports for us with content. And
Mm-hmm.
so around that time, they believe it was 2010. Actually, it is 2010. They make a film called Who is Job. So my friend Beth actually has been involved in a lot of the Job stuff at Red Bull as one of the supervising producers. So I got her on the phone. She gave me a little backstory on all this stuff. But basically, he was working on a little bit of a documentary with his life and his surfing and everything around 2009, 2010. Basically went to Red Bull and said, hey, I'm working on this, but I need a little bit of help. Can you guys help fund part of it? And if you want to help me distribute it, that'd be cool too. So they put the resources into Who is Job and make that kind of the next film after That's It, That's All. So they've had some success with some of their own films at this point. Who is Job is the next one to drop. And then after that has a really positive reception, they decide, oh, this is our guy for surfing. He does kind of the more lifestyle, fun, funny, like prank kind of stuff. We can use this.
Yeah.
This fits the brand. And so they launch the Who is Job series immediately after the launch of the film and continue that for 9 seasons. They end it in December of 2019, right, as things are kind of winding up for the pandemic, basically.
Yeah.
But what happened earlier that year, Jamie was at a GoPro Athlete Summit. So this is something that I've been wanting to do more of as my consulting stuff kind of takes off, is like setting up these summits for brands, because these are like inflection points for athletes. And this is a perfect example of it. One of the guys from GoPro is sitting down with Jamie saying, like, I love your series. Is that on your channel? Like, do you own that footage? Like, what control do you have? Or what happens if Red Bull decides they don't want to make it anymore, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
And it gets Jamie's gears turning. He realizes that he doesn't actually control Who is Job, even though
they could just take it off the internet tomorrow.
It's his name, but he doesn't actually have the control and he can't do anything. He's still kind of at zero. Now, to be fair, he did have a YouTube channel that he was putting stuff on at the same time, but it wasn't as highly produced as the web series that he'd been working on.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Red Bull just like took that on from the get-go, and that it wasn't like sort of led by him. That's super interesting.
Yeah, they added supervising producers. They made it super professional so that it was like a high quality thing that would perform really, really well. They were paying attention to what was working on YouTube at the time, and they were developing content. And Jamie's personality and the level of surfing that was going on, it was kind of the perfect mix of everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the channel, he starts his channel, he gets his YouTube channel going with a little bit of the, momentum from everybody. And then when the series ends at the end of 2019, he kind of takes over the momentum. So, usually an athlete would have a harder time doing that, but because they had been filming a series and they had hundreds of thousands of people exclusively watching his content, and then they stopped making it, all he really had to do is raise his hand like, oh, we're over here now. And he's able to like pull that entire audience over into his YouTube channel where he could continue the momentum and continue to build it. But from then on, he owned it. So,
dang. So everything up until 2019 was hosted on like Red Bull TV or Red Bull's YouTube. And then starting in end of 2019, early 2020, Who is Job or whatever he ended up calling it, lived on his personal YouTube channel.
Yeah. So I like to say, you own it like Oprah. Like you got full control. No one can tell you what to do. You own the production company. You own the output. You own the business. And I think that's a huge inflection point for Jamie and for all of his stuff that would then be built on it. Because could you imagine building on a retail shop and building on a clothing brand and everything else, and then have Red Bull just pull the plug because their web series strategy changed?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do?
Brutal.
Yeah.
No.
You'd be flat-footed.
Man, I mean, but it is crazy because that's like an insane amount of work. Like Red Bull Red Bull's investment in him got the whole thing going and got it off the ground starting back in 2008 or whatever. And man, but even just to like take over and where it was at and like hit the ground running, that's an insane amount of work. And I just feel like that not that many athletes actually want to take on that level of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think about that all the time when I'm listening to you guys like go off on stuff on here. And like, it's really, if you think about it, oh, here's how you do YouTube, here's how you do a podcast, and you just do this and you start a merch and then you do the whole thing. But like most athletes are not wanting to take that on. They're like, I just want to be the best and race. And like at most I'll pay somebody to make a YouTube video for me occasionally.
I think that he had a lot of momentum, not just from the content, but also from the production of like, oh, this is what it takes to produce this.
Yeah.
And I know that if I do this right, I'll be able to continue the momentum. And so if I have to invest money into doing it,
the concept's proven. He's not just taking a leap of faith. Like I hope people watch funny surfing videos.
Yeah. And he probably knows like, oh, I need to have a producer. I need a PA. I need 2 filmers. I need 2 editors. And in fact, probably, I don't know this for sure, but he probably could have scooped the people that were already working on it just to work for him instead.
Easy.
But I I think that's the thing, right? Like you have this point where you're on your own, you're filming everything by yourself, and you're like, I can only work so much harder. Like this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the leap to be like, well, I'm going to hire someone to help me do this it feels like a giant leap, but it would unlock a ton of stuff if you find the right person, or if you're willing to put the extra time into getting somebody up to that place. And I
Yeah.
think for him, he had the confidence, and like at that point, he's a giant surfer who has the resources to hire a handful of people to help him out.
How much is he competing at that point?
I don't think he ever needs to compete anymore. I think every competition for him is just sort of for fun.
Yeah.
He's a great surfer and he's won pipeline a bunch of times, but I don't
Yeah.
think any of that stuff is done for the money. And if you look at, I mean, I actually know how much the Red Bull contract was worth. He didn't need to compete. He could just be Jamie O'Brien and he'd be
Right.
fine. And he could hire
For
people,
sure. Yeah.
but
No, that's
he's
super interesting just because if you're not trying to like simultaneously be the best in the world and like you let off the gas just like 10%, I can imagine that like you have a whole bunch more time and energy. And like for me anyway, when I go on off season and like strip back the training just a little bit, all of a sudden like creativity starts kicking in. I take on a whole bunch of new projects to become a problem as soon as I start having to train again. But that's like that's a really exciting,
yeah.
thing to think about.
Well, and you're like you said, he had the confidence to know that it was going to work. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you were to just be like, you know what, I'm going to invest, like I'm going to hire the right person right out of the gate, and it's going to
Yeah.
hurt. It's going to hurt for a little bit, but I know that in a year or two, this is totally going to be worth it, and I'm going to leapfrog wherever I was. I'm thinking about a project for next year that I want to take on for Super Rider,
Mm-hmm.
and I could do it, but I would just burn myself out immediately if I tried to do it all by myself. But if I could hire somebody to help me,
Yeah.
and even if I gave them the bulk of the money that I was making from it, it would set me up that year two, I could actually probably make it work. And then it would just build from there. But if
Yeah.
I continue just doing it myself, like it's never going to get to that point probably ever. So,
Yeah.
it's like you have to like let go of the side of the pool on some of this stuff if you really want to get there.
Yeah, it's hard. I think we're burdened by being able to do it versus I know a lot like professional triathlon, I think is like kind of in a golden era for if you want to be a fan and know what professional triathletes are doing. Like everybody has a YouTube channel that is like a bigger name in the sport. And 99% of these people have hired a YouTube person to just like run their YouTube, and maybe they give them all of the revenue that comes in from their YouTube channel. But what I've heard most of them are doing is they go to Canyon Bikes or they go to SRAM or whatever and say, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel over the top of my athlete contract and budget that you have. Can we throw in there like an extra 10 grand or 5 grand a year for like media budget? And I'm going to put that directly into hiring somebody to come to Ironman Frankfurt, Ironman Kona, et cetera, et cetera. And for the most part, brands I think are like, oh yeah, 100%. And that's not even coming out of the athlete budget. That's coming just out of our general marketing slush fund, which is gigantic, right? Compared to what we're just going to pay athletes to be athletes.
Well, there's two things there. The first is that brands are looking for this sort of UGC content that they can reuse for paid ads or for their
Mm-hmm.
own, output and stuff like that. And that is a large bucket at most companies. From the
Yeah.
tech brands that I've worked with in the past, the UGC bucket or growth ads as they call it, that bucket is typically the biggest bucket and by like an order of magnitude or two.
Wow.
So you're right. Like
Yeah.
being able to tap into that bucket is huge. And I think this is a really interesting point for not only the people who are athletes listening, but also for the people that work at brands that are listening. I think there's a ton of value with having branded content like that on the athletes' channels and helping the athlete channels grow. I think that athlete channels grow
100%.
faster than brand channels no matter what. They're more credible no matter
100%.
what. But it's also like you're spreading your message out across multiple channels. So when you do have a launch, you now have a secondary channel that's also going to be helping build that momentum and build that voice. Whereas if you're a brand and you're just putting all your money into your YouTube channel, into your output on Instagram and everything else, I feel like you're sort of shortchanging yourself and you're kind of leaving these athletes out to dry when it comes to like when it is time for you to do that big social media thunderclap of like, all right, everybody, we got a new product launch. If you haven't invested in helping them grow their channels, that's only going to hurt you when you need to go out to that versus in Red Bull's case, they helped Jamie really get his channel to where it is or to get his standing to where it was. And then whenever they wanted to do anything, they've got this giant lever they can pull now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
I think a huge crux of that is like really truly letting it be branded content that's on an athlete's channel, and not trying to like be overbearing with like, we need to see this logo or this product or whatever, like there, I think that's like a fine line to walk, where you let the athlete and you pick the appropriate athlete that aligns with the brand, and it just feels so natural that they're always wearing, whatever watch or whatever shirt or whatever, running shoes, so that you don't have to say, hey, don't forget to say that in the new PVA poem, in the thing and whatever, please, on Friday. It like happens naturally, and the athlete's excited because you're just supporting them and telling their story. And I feel like that's the best symbiotic relationships that I've had, where the companies are kind of like, you do cool stuff, we want to be associated with it. And every once in a while, yeah, there's like a product launch that's coming out, but we're just kind of not concerned, because we know you love the product so much, you're going to want to tell people about it.
Yep, absolutely. Here's the perfect maybe point for this. Obviously, Red Bull and all of Jamie's other sponsors have invested in his channel to help him get it to this point. And now they have this huge lever to be able to tell their story and to be featured and to reach a giant audience of 1.27 million subscribers, and then way more. I mean, some of the videos on there are like in the millions, right?
Yeah.
His YouTube channel is actually larger than the WSL, the World Surf League. So Jamie O'Brien has a bigger audience on YouTube than the #1 competitive surf league in the world.
Yeah. And these people are so tuned in, right? Like they want to know what surfboard he's using. They want to know the fins and like all the, whatever, all the things that go into surfing. I'm not a surf expert, but like that's certainly what we've experienced. Like the level of engagement and interest that you build, like by putting out videos frequently, like people are so invested and interested.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where things get interesting. So we've laid the foundation, right? Jamie O'Brien's got his empire already built. I didn't mention this, but he has a clothing brand that he launched off the back of the channel called Stay Psyched. That's semi-relevant, but that's also another business.
Yeah.
And probably lines up pretty closely to TTL. Like you guys have this brand that you're doing as well.
Right. It doesn't just say Jamie on the front. It's like an actual thing.
It's an actual brand. Yeah.
Right.
If you didn't know Jamie, you'd still be psyched on it.
Right. I think that's huge.
So in 2021, he inked a deal with Turtle Bay, which is a big resort on the North Shore of Oahu, to launch the Jamie O'Brien Surf Experience. So guests that go to this 5-star resort in Hawaii, instead of just like renting surfboards from the front desk, you get this like Jamie O'Brien experience where it's him and all the guys from the channel and their friends teaching you and your kids how to surf, which is actually what I got to experience in Waikiki. So they launched it in Turtle Bay. What was interesting is that it wasn't Jamie just like posting up a retail shop. I'm going to do this thing and hopefully people show up to it because I'm Jamie O'Brien. He partnered with a hotel that has this constant stream of new guests coming in. And because it's partnered with the hotel, they have a vested interest in making sure that their guests utilize that service. And I don't know the details specifically, but I've got to imagine Turtle Bay is paying Jamie and the crew to have him in there doing his thing. They could have just had like a basic surf school or whatever, but they've got Jamie O'Brien because he's a big deal. And
man, I would be so curious to know how the details of that contract, because everybody's winning.
Yeah, and he's making content at Turtle Bay, obviously, and people are coming there to see him and to go to his, surf shop right there to participate. But even if you remove Jamie completely and his content completely, you still have a high functioning surf experience, surf shop, surf lessons, all of the things that people are looking for when they go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
So he then continues to develop the brand of the Jamie O'Brien Surf Experience. He's got 2 other locations that are also partnered up with hotels. So you can see he's doing the retail thing, but he's kind of hedging his bet by building it into a partnership with an active hotel. So he has the Turtle Bay Resort partnership on the North Shore. He has a partnership with the Twin Fin in Waikiki, another hotel that's right on the beachfront there in Waikiki. And that's like the other famous surf break, I guess, or like the not famous surf break, but it's like a family friendly surf break that's like highly
approachable.
Trafficked. Yeah. Like if you go to Waikiki for a family vacation, you're within like 2 or 3 blocks of Jamie's spot.
Okay.
And then he also has another partnership with another hotel, the Hotel del Coronado, which is in San Diego.
I've been there.
Well, there you go. You could have been
It's
surfing.
rad.
You could have been at the Jamie O'Brien surf experience.
I don't know if he had it back the last time I was there, but that's freaking awesome.
So they have surf lessons, they have paddleboarding, they have a Grom surf experience, which is what my kids did. They have a sup squatch. It's like a giant surfboard basically with like 10 people can
Yep,
go
the
on
Sup
paddle.
Squatch.
Yeah.
Oh, I know all about it.
And then you go into the shop and you can get Stay Psyched merch. You can get apparel from his other sponsors and other surf related things. So that's what I saw inside the shop when I went in Waikiki. They had the boards for the school. They had his merch. They had the TV screens and the GoPro stuff. So you could buy stuff from all of his partners, right? Like Buell Wetsuits just had got a lifetime sponsorship with him.
Heck yeah.
GoPro has been his partner forever. There's a Red Bull fridge in there, obviously. And then he's got all of his Stay Psych gear. And then he's got like the basics of, sunscreen and snorkels and all the stuff you'd expect to see in a shop.
Yeah.
What I didn't see in there was the things that you would associate with a typical surf shop. I don't see it, but I don't think there was a whole lot of selection for like, I'm just coming in here to buy a surfboard or I want to buy a wetsuit. So his inventory was actually pretty low. It was just sort of the essentials to run a good surf school. And also just like, oh, I'm walking down the beach. What are the things that a random person might come in? So they've really optimized for the foot traffic that's coming through.
Tourists.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. It's basically driven off of tourists. And maybe, gosh, I can't even guess what percentage of people are coming there as sort of a pilgrimage. I've got to imagine the bulk of the people, like 95% of the people coming through there have no idea who Jamie is, but there's a ton of value, and all of the touch points with this retail space and the school itself were just incredible.
Yeah, man, that's wild because he's just got an insanely high traffic. He's like, he got a free spot at the mall.
Yeah.
With like the perfect product.
I was thinking about you and TTL the entire time I was there. I was like, oh my God, Eric is going to lose his mind when he hears about this place.
I mean, I am losing my mind hearing about all the things like, yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. That's what I would do.
Well, and I think really what struck me was that these are perfect locations with tons of foot traffic, with immediate access to the opportunity to experience the sport, right?
Yeah.
So where are the places where triathlon, for example, could be that? You've got a really big community in Bend of people that, it could be sort of a destination.
Yeah.
But I wonder also, I mean, I don't know what you think about this idea, but like Kona would probably be one of the best places to have a triathlon shop like that, because people hear all about it. They're coming through. There's beautiful roads to ride. There's swimming to be done. But it's also like not necessarily in the brand, but if you were a triathlete and you wanted to go to the right place to do it, I wonder if that's the place. I don't know. Where is the right place to have a triathlon shop if it's not Bend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's even Bend, to be honest. Like Bend is really cool from a multi-surface perspective. I've thought about having camps here, and I would love to have a store here, but it would be a little bit more like our specific brand of triathlon that involves gravel riding and some mountain biking and trail running versus like your quintessential triathlete. Well, these days, like half of the people are just sitting on their trainers in the garage, but Tucson is a much bigger hotspot for triathlon right now. I don't know how many people specifically go to Kona for a training camp. It's obviously got an iconic course and such a legacy and everything in the course itself, but is like on a highway. So like I went and made a film there with a good friend, Ralph Dunning of Foreign Rider, and we kind of hit some more like deep cut roads that are on the inside. And I do think there's some potential there to be like, yes, we're going to ride the Queen K. We're going to do the thing. You're going to see what it's like, but also like we're going to do the deep cuts of Kona and like really show you some cool stuff that doesn't just like occur to everybody. If I was going to do it there, that's kind of how I would do it.
Yeah. I was thinking too about what people come to this Jamie O'Brien spot for, and they are absolute beginners that have like an excitement about dipping into this,
Yeah.
And so it's not people that are like, I'm going to fly to Hawaii to go do the Jamie thing, or I'm going to fly to San Diego specifically for it. It's like, I'm here and this is the right thing to do in this place.
Yeah.
But I'm a beginner in every sort of way. So I wonder, it's almost like it's like a 101 camp. So maybe the Queens Highway is not the 101 thing.
I'll scare the shit out of me.
Yeah. Right.
But I think there's like in Europe, I think there might be couple of better options. There are actually some hotels and like full on resorts over there that are catering towards endurance athletes right now. I'm not sure if it's Mallorca or, there's like some island getaways that I have not been to just because like I like to hang out in the US.
Yeah.
But I think those are like pretty much tailor made, ready to go, like relatively quiet roads. The whole island is sort of a resort, and you could like pretty easily. It seems to me they're currently sponsoring, to asking athletes to come over and like, hey, come over here, do a content thing, like tell people you're training at our resort. I think that would be the slam dunk. I don't personally want to go to Europe and like fully set up retail in Europe, but the US is getting kind of tricky for triathlon, where like roads are getting a lot busier. Boulder is just getting busier. Bend's getting busier. San Diego is like, I freaking love San Diego, but the roads down there are just insane. And what it takes to like get out of town and not be at stoplights and like ride consistently in your aero bars, there's like a shrinking number of places where that's possible.
What were the ideas that you had kind of going into the athlete retail discussion? I mean, what are the things that you are thinking about? Or maybe this Jamie way is an interesting way to do it. And I've got to imagine there's some essence here that also plays into other sports, but I also think there's other ways that you could approach it. I think one of the ideas I had for you was, you like obviously coffee is, a big part of the brand and stuff like that. And coffee
Yep.
shop would be relatively easy, but I think I was recommending like, oh, what if it was like a podcast studio for like other people that wanted to have
Yeah.
like a professional zone to do podcasts, and then you could obviously use it for your stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my dreams, I have a building picked out and everything here in Bend. It's been on the market for a while now. It's pretty huge. And it would require like a multifaceted approach like that, where yes, you can come and get a coffee. I would have it sponsored by Thump Coffee and like have like almost free. Like if you're coming in, you're going to like hang out and shop around and like get inspired and watch triathlon stuff or, multi-sport stuff on TV. Like you can get an espresso for $1, and I would just like, but it's going to be freaking good. And
Yeah.
people are going to want to come in for that. And I would try to have a hangout area, so it feels like this is like a community hub. I think that's a really important thing to me. Dedicate a fair amount of like floor space to that. Then I think you could do a great job doing bike fits. That's a really huge thing. And one thing that's, maybe I haven't found the right person, but in Bend, I have not found a person that I just feel like is a super slam dunk mechanic when it comes to high end road bikes. And there's a lot of them around here, and that's a major thing. And that drove a ton of traffic into Athletes Lounge. My friend Danny was just like, had incredible bedside manner and could make everybody confident that like he cared about their bike as much as they cared about their bike. And I felt like that was like one half of the beating heart of
Yeah.
the local bike shop. I was like, you're not going to compete on price online anymore. And then, I would do the same thing that Jamie's done, where we bring in like Orca wetsuits, Wahoo bike computers, trainers. Like you could try out one of the new prototype treadmills that they've got. So you can find out like, is this something that I want for my house? Like we get a crazy amount of questions from people about like, why do you use this pair of shoes from On? And why do you use the rollers from Wahoo instead of the stationary trainer? And if you could just like put all that in one place and have like this super cool curated shopping experience, partially with our sponsors, and also bring in all these other like, this is a really cool light mount that will go on your seat post. And like when I go into a surf shop, what I freaking love is when it feels like everything is on the same page of coolness, and I just want everything in there. Like I don't need body surfing fins like most of the time, but I'm sitting there looking at these body surfing fins because they're the coolest tie-dye looking thing I've ever seen. And I'm like running through my mind trying to figure out how I can get into body surfing just so I can get these fins. And the same thing with like, they've got one or two shirts that are just like so freaking cool. They don't have 45 shirts. And that's what I would be going for, is just, you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, everything in here I didn't know existed, and it's freaking cool.
What about, and I'm just going to, since we're sort of riffing, what if you had a gym? Like instead of it being a retail space where you're really meant to like buy stuff, why wouldn't you have like a triathlon gym where it has exactly the rollers you guys use, it has exactly the, the running platforms that you guys use, and people are paying a monthly subscription to come in and be part of the gym. But then as part of their experience, not only can they come in and do their workouts, which I know you guys work out like hours every day, and everyone else in the sport does too. But then there is like a spot where you can pick up your nutrition stuff. You could run like sessions in there where you're teaching stuff. You could I mean, you could build it out that way, but also I'm just thinking of like, how do you get people to come into that shop all the time, not just when they need something? Because like I did triathlons every now and then when I was working with you, and
Yep.
I was in Athletes Lounge to pick up some nutrition beforehand or to get my bike tweaked, and but still, like I didn't go there that often, other than to throw high fives to Gary every now and then. But if you had that place, like if you added a gym to the back of it, where it's like, well, come in here and you can use our rollers, you can use our woodway, you can use our, mechanic, whatever. Like that might be interesting to have a gym that also has a built-in mechanic, that also has a built-in retail shop. Like that might be a completely different way to think about it, but that could work too. And you'd have that monthly, just people coming in all the time.
Unfortunately, I've seen that fail
Oh,
over
really?
and over again
Aw.
in the Portland scene. Like it seems like a great idea and everybody thinks it's a great idea. And they're like, yeah, one half of the shop is going to be like a room full of kickers. And then we're gonna have a room full of treadmills and like everybody's going to want to come. But then I think when it comes down to it, like triathletes specifically, freaking busy people. Like
Yeah.
you're trying to fit in training for 3 different sports, and just the time that it takes to drive to the gym
Yeah.
is potentially going to be a deal breaker. So
Mm.
everybody's like trying to figure out how to get a treadmill in their house, get a kicker in their house, hang out on Zwift, be as efficient as possible so they can do this without getting a divorce. So like I still think like that just takes up a crazy amount of floor space and square
Yeah.
footage. You have to have a huge building, and then you have to pay somebody to run classes. And like we've had insane, I don't want to say insane, but we have had like really good experience using Zwift as a platform to connect with our global audience by
Mm.
hosting group rides on Sunday morning. We get like 200 people out and they can talk directly with us via chat and everything. Everybody's got the stuff in their own home. And while I think like I love the in-person thing, I just think that like when it comes to the training, if you're trying to go outside, people want to be together because there's like safety in numbers and maybe you don't know the roads and the routes. But just as far as like efficiency, triathlon is like going this direction of just like get it done. The workout on the trainer is actually better than the workout outside. I just want to go to Kona. I just want to get the highest FTP power number, et cetera. And I personally feel like the thing that is lacking is this like beating heart of culture
Mm.
and vibes and like a central like unity of feeling like what does triathlon even mean? Is it about being the fastest and getting there at all costs and just like not having any friends, or can we like be in the same direction that I think it started out and their ultra running is at and where gravel's at, where like there's this vibe and there's this energy and you want to go be around other people. And I
Yeah.
feel like that could be had just by having like a rad hangout spot with people who are just freaking stoked on the sport. You went into Athletes Lounge to talk to Gary.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name names, but I know there was a couple other people there who, if you went in and Gary wasn't there and the other people were there, you'd be in and out as quickly as possible. Maybe you'd buy one gel. But if somebody's there, like I felt like when I worked in Athletes Lounge, it was not my job to sell bikes. It was my job to make people feel good about themselves. And then they would buy something in the
Mhm.
process. Whenever it came up for them to buy that they needed a thing, they would come back in and buy it. But people would come in, I was like, that's an awesome workout. Wow. Oh my gosh. I can't believe you went that fast around Savi Island. What's your next race? And just like get that person hyped on
Yeah.
the sport.
Yeah. So the other thing that I thought made the most sense with what Jamie was doing was how he protected the risk of, he partnered with the hotels specifically to
Yeah.
probably give him the space. I'm sure there's some sort of cash exchange for him putting his name on the school itself. But
Yeah.
I wonder if that's something also thinking about, of like, instead of having to take on the expense of the retail space, like
Yeah.
could you actually partner with one of the more outdoor themed hotels that are in Bend? I know there's a handful of them there, but I wonder if that's something. I'm also just like really interested overall, not just for retail, but like how you can subsidize stuff. For
Yep.
example, this idea of, if I was traveling to film something, is there somebody locally that I could work with that, like a tourism board or something like
Yeah.
that, that has a vested interest in my success too?
Yeah.
Where a hotel's like, we're trying to stoke out guests, we're trying to get people to be outside, and that's why they're coming to our hotel. Could you provide a high-end service and something that would stoke them out? Because they want the same thing you want, right? They want the people to be really fired up, have this experience that they want to come back for. And with a shop that you would open that's associated with your brand, you would
Yeah.
want them to be all fired up and then have this incredible experience that you had a hand in, just
Yeah.
to deepen the relationship beyond just what's been built so far.
Yeah, 100%. I think what's really impressive to me about what Jamie's done is that Jamie's not teaching every one of these surf lessons, but like I assume that some percentage of people know who Jamie is and they're just excited to be associated with a thing that he built. And I think TTL is there a little bit, but we're still kind of in this phase of where I think people like really, really tie the brand to Paula and I. And if we had like the TTL Bend experience hosted by Loge Camps, and whatever, that's like a recurring, ongoing thing daily, and we're not there. Like in my mind, my fear is like people like, well, I was here for a week and I did 3 gravel rides and a swim in the river, and Eric wasn't here ever. Like, yeah, I know that he came up with the routes, but like that's the fear that I have in my mind. And then like, okay, well, how am I still able to ride my bike occasionally and make the content that we're making and grow the online community and all this thing? So like how to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's like the fear that pops into my head.
I think you just have to get the camp or the, the space to a point where the experience alone is worth coming to. And it's like a bonus if you're there, because there's no way that you can scale any other way,
Right.
and that's the thing with the Jamie thing. The surf experience was so incredible. I don't think Jamie actually would have added much to it. It would have been cool to high five him and see him and whatever, but I don't actually think it would have made too much of a difference had he been there or not. It was an awesome experience no matter what. And I think that's something
that's cool to know,
kind of think about, of like what would need to be true for this to be a meaningful experience to somebody, even if they were a fan of you and Paula.
Yeah.
What would need to be true for them to still have like the best weekend of their lives in Bend, Oregon, or wherever you host this thing?
No, that makes sense, and it's good to hear you say that. Like I've thought about, I would really like to have us have like an off-road triathlon event. I think that's like so on brand for us, and like the idea of creating an experience, like you just said, that feels like through and through TTL and what we have built. That's super exciting to me. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to like ride on the course with all whatever 300 or however many people end up doing the first one, but just knowing that like we are behind it, and as long as it's like you said, freaking awesome, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Like you get the essence of TTL.
Yeah.
But it's not required for you to be there every single time, because the experience itself, I mean, events, perfect way to put your stamp on something and give people an amazing experience. And it, I've had this conversation with more than a few people, but to be a triathlete, you kind of have to, be doing events. Like you can't just be a triathlete without doing triathlons.
I'm trying to change that. But currently it is just, oh, you do triathlon? Have you done Kona?
Yeah.
What have you done the full Ironman? Like, what's your next race? Like, what's your PR? Like, those are all the conversations that comes up. It's not like, oh, what's the coolest bike ride you've been on lately? I've never had that conversation with somebody, and I hope that it trends that way, and that's what I'm working towards. But in the meantime, events are everything.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really interesting thing, and there's a reason why Jamie O'Brien is one of the few athletes to have actually cracked retail, and why a lot of other people would much rather put all the resources into brand or content or anything else other than this. But there's an interesting lesson here with what he's done, and I think if we can find the essence and kind of wring it out for our own ends, I think there's something really cool here. But just looking at his whole thing of how he's gone from making content to now having like an empire. I mean, his empire spans every direction at this point, and it just continues to grow because he's still making content. People are still having an amazing experience at his surf camps. And why wouldn't, I mean, if you wanted to get really gnarly, if you're in Jamie's shoes right now, you could just go all over the world and just copy paste the surf experience. Like, cool, let's go make one of these in, Cape Town, South Africa. Let's go to Australia and make one. Let's go to whatever. I mean, you'd probably lose a little bit of the essence and the clout, but maybe not. I mean, again, I didn't need Jamie to be there. It was an amazing experience. As long as you can make sure that the quality of the experience remains high, I think you probably could 10x the amount of experiences there are. And maybe they're working on that. I don't know, but
I mean, he's obviously figured out how to train people and impart people with the nest that he wants, the experience to convey to people. And I feel like that's got to be like one of the great successes of franchising or just like growing any sort of a company, like that strong culture. that, yeah, if we stand this up in South Africa, the people that we get in there, they really truly are passionate about this. And it's going to be the same exact experience if you go to Hawaii or South Africa, and at least in terms of like the excitement. Stay stoked,
Yeah.
stay psyched, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I worked at McDonald's when I was in high school, and there was like a training video that you had to watch that was just awful, you know, VHS style. And I just think about like, what is the JOB, you know, employee video look like?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot easier to get employees excited about teaching people to surf and take pictures of people who are surfing than it is to, you know, get people excited about flipping a burger. But
Oh, that was actually, I forgot to mention this, but the people shooting the photos and videos of our kids in the water, they were actually completely subcontracted out. So that was a completely separate
genius.
business. So, you know, there's again like keeping their inventory low, keeping their costs as low as possible, and then obviously it's subsidized by the hotel. But then they also brought in these people who were in the water, but they didn't get anything unless they shot good photos and people bought them. But it's a pretty safe bet, just like everything else. Like you're on vacation, your kids are surfing for the first time, you have sick photos of it. Of course, you're going to pay $80 for the package to get those photos.
Yeah.
And for them, like they get to keep all that money for the privilege of being able to be associated with Jamie's school. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to have.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Like looking at the things that I actually need to have this in house versus if I don't have this in house and somebody is excited enough about what we're doing for them to be motivated to grow it on their own and have like this little mini business that contributes to the whole thing. I feel like that is empowering that person. That's giving that person this huge sense of excitement that they're part of a bigger thing, but that also each day that they can make a difference, you know, like in their future and in what's going on. So like that's like a really cool spot. And I've tried to do that with TTL like a fair bit. Like that's kind of how we set up the podcast. Is I was like very stressed about trying to do a podcast. I felt like I could barely stay on top of YouTube videos and everything. But then our good friend Nick was like, I really think you guys should have a podcast. And I said, fine, sure. You know what? Honestly, like let's do a podcast, but I'm going to show up each week and I'm going to talk and I will promote the heck out of it because I think it's a great idea, but you're going to have to like curate the questions, and however we want to monetize it, we'll like split that up. So like you're like getting this little franchise part of the company, and that like gave Nick this sense of like ownership over it, and he took it and ran with it, and it completely has become one of the like the best things that we do with TTL. And it's not because I was like, all right, I'm going to go learn how to edit a podcast. I'm going to like research microphones, and I'm going to said, no, that's not my thing, but I think it is could be a huge part of what we have going on. Go for it.
So cool, man. So cool. Well, that's everything I know about athlete retail so far. I feel like this is constantly evolving. And I know there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast who have retail experience. I wonder what kind of comments we're going to get back after this of just like, hey, you guys should be thinking about this. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. But again, like this is one of the first things I've actually seen successfully operate in athlete retail. And it's exciting. I've been dying to tell you about it because I'm just so fired up that like somebody figured it out. He cracked the code.
I think it's so rad.
Yeah,
like that is still like a high priority goal for me. I have not figured out all the codes of how it would work with triathlon specifically, but like it's awesome to see that Jamie has made it work, and that's like inspiring. Like, okay, this is a possible thing if you have the right scenario and the right partners and the right location and all the things. You just have to like do that crazy front end work.
He's the first guy to run the 4-minute mile, and now we're all right behind him.
That's how it works. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, wow, it is possible. It's like daunting, but it is possible. I'm not just like jumping off into outer space here, hoping that something like hits something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, usually we have a BPC, but I feel like this was a deep dive into kind of all three. If you need something to look up, anybody listening should absolutely dig in to Jamie O'Brien's YouTube channel and watch every single video on there. It's going to take you a while. And then check out the Jamie O'Brien Surf Experience. I want to chat with some people that actually work on the project, but I'm just like, my brain is buzzing after this Hawaii trip. And I needed to have this little riff session and like tell you all about it. So.
Oh man, if you like can find somebody who can like give you the framework for how the employee and like the setup of the organization, the logistics of this whole thing, that would I'd pay a lot of money for that, because that's where my brain breaks. Like, I can think up all these things and like, wait, who's in charge of that, and who answers to who, and where does it,
Yeah. Big copy paste. Thank you very much.
Yeah.